Long Black Song, it's a very powerful story because, of course, we see that the movement towards violence in the end is quite a powerful movement. And it's worth sort of giving some attention to it in some detail. Because, of course, we see that Silas gives an aria of the abuses he has felt as a black man. Because he says that I work so hard, I've been cheated, I've been abused, I slave, and I don't get my just deserts, I don't get anything, and these people keep taking things from me, and they keep taking things from me. And he says, finally I come to the thing that is mine, all mine, my woman, and they take my woman from me. How can they just do this? It's a very interesting thing because, of course, he has no empathy for Sarah. What he's saying is that it's about what has been taken from him and the damage and the destruction that has been taken from him. She has a counter view in the sense that she keeps saying, don't do this because you will die. They will kill you. Why don't you think about us? She keeps saying, we'll be fine. We'll work it out. But Silas will not abide by it. Silas will not accept it. And it's very interesting to listen to how this story ends. The shack blazed, flanked on all sides by whirling smoke filled with flying sparks. She, Sarah, heard the distant hiss of flames. White men were crawling on their stomachs. Now and then they stopped, aimed, and fired into the bulging smoke. She looked with a tense numbness. She looked, waiting for Silas to scream or run out, but the house cracked and blazed, spouting yellow plumes to the blue sky. The white men shot again, sending a hail of bullets into the furious pillars of smoke, and still she could not see Silas running out or hear his voice calling. Then she jumped, standing. There was a loud crash. The roof caved in. A black chimney loomed amid crumbling wood. Flames roared, and the black smoke billowed, hiding the house. The white men stood up, no longer afraid. Again, she waited for Silas, waited to see him fight his way out, waited to hear his call. Then she breathed a long, slow breath, emptying her lungs. She knew now Silas had killed as many as he could and had stayed on to burn, had stayed without a murmur. She filled her lungs with a quick gasp as the walls fell in. The house was hidden by eager plumes of red. She turned and ran with the baby in her arms, ran blindly across the fields crying, "Nah, God." It's a very powerful ending to the story. And of course, she knows that Silas has done what he can. Is he a hero? Is the question. And it's really a question that is worth asking you as a student thinking and reading this work as a critic. Is Silas the hero? Well, certainly. Richard Wright constructs a narrative in which he's kind of this tragic hero. He's defending his woman. He's defending himself, isn't he? He's not trying to defend her. I mean, he decides, he tells her to run away, go to Peels, run to another place where you'll be safe there, because he knows that he's going to take action in this moment, and violent and destructive action, and an action that he eventually cannot walk away from. Richard Wright, in this short story, is doing something that he does throughout this collection called Uncle Tom's Children. And throughout it, he looks at these black men. And what he's doing is he's constructing a narrative that really privileges the black man. Because here's the interesting thing. If we had a very explicit rape situation in which there was a violent act against Sarah, by that I mean explicit, it's not ambivalent or ambiguous. In other words, if she had no complicity or no suggestion of complicity, no sexist suggestion of complicity, then Silas's actions, his insensitivity to her, his anger with her, his feeling as if he's been betrayed by the world, could not hold up. Yet on the other hand, if she is fully complicit, in other words, if she's willing to sleep with this man, then as readers, we will then ask the question, when Silas attacks the white man, is he justified in doing so because Sarah went with him willingly? In order to prevent us from taking any of those positions, what he does, Richard Wright, is that he makes that encounter ambiguous. He makes that counter almost ambivalent. And that then allows Silas to be the wronged, as in a cuckolded man, but it also gives him the right to take revenge on the white man, because the white man has taken advantage of his woman and may have, in this gray area, used his power to impose upon her and actually raped her, but raped her in a very, very explicit way in which she seems to have some engagement and complicity. In our world, the notion that a woman may have expressed or flirted and then said no, in our world today, we know this to be still an act of rape. When we are talking about where this novel is set, this story is set, it's a point at which that is questionable, but it's still a point at which that ambivalence and that ambiguity allows Silas to emerge as a kind of heroic figure. A figure who then has been wronged by society, abused by white society, a victim of racism, who then enacts his own revenge. It's a self-destructive revenge, but a revenge nonetheless, because he manages to kill some of the people who he regards as his oppressors. As you start reading this work and starting to write about it, or you think to write about it, this is one of the things worth examining. The other things we can pay attention to is the ways in which Silas's situation, as I mentioned in Jim Crow, in The Ethics of Living Jim Crow, is that Silas's situation is a catch-22. What are his choices? If he decides to ignore what has happened, where's his dignity as a man? But if he decides to stand up and say he's going to act in true machismo, then it's going to mean his death and destruction. The African American man is seen as a victim of a system that is constantly fighting him and seeking to destroy him, in Richard Wright's Long Black Song. As you think about it, I think it's to ask the question then, one of the questions that emerges all the time in this work is, what are the ethics of Jim Crow in this story? What is this thing about the question of rape? Is it rape? And if it is rape, or if it is not rape, what does it do? Now notice, I'm saying that the ambivalence is not because Richard Wright is ambivalent about what rape is, but I think Richard Wright intentionally makes it ambivalent to then position his character, his black male, as a kind of heroic figure. Because we can't center too much empathy on Sarah, because then that changes the nature of that story. It's a very patriarchal story. It's a very male-centered story.